Forspoken. Man, this game just cannot catch a break. I've already talked about its meager critical and audience reception. I've talked about its Steam reviews and how it still continues to be mixed in its score. I've talked about the fact that peak concurrent players didn't really peak all that high, suggesting that sales for this game weren't particularly great. In fact, it was reported that Hi-Fi Rush, which was sold at $30 at launch, did better than Forspoken did at $70, even though Hi-Fi Rush was shadow dropped. It managed to generate more revenue at more than half the cost, so that's pretty indicative of just how well Forspoken did. And then came the news that Luminous Productions, the development studio behind Forspoken, will be shutting down as announced on February 27th, 2023. The shutdown will happen on May 1st after they've released the DLC for the game, In Tanta We Trust, which is more of an obligation than anything. Early access to this DLC was promised to folks who bought the digital deluxe edition, so they kind of have to get this out there. And then came a shift in leadership announced on March 3rd, 2023. The details are right here. Yosuke Matsuda, the former president, will be replaced by Takashi Kiryu. Yosuke Matsuda is known for just how heavily he's been pushing for NFTs and play to earn and all of these kinds of concepts that really gamers don't want any part of. They don't want that stuff to seep into gaming because their intent is clearly more monetization based rather than, something that will genuinely enhance our gaming experience. Unfortunately, the replacement of this president won't change that aspect all that much because Takashi Kiryu turns out to be someone who was involved in Dentsu Innovation Initiative, a business group exploring exciting opportunities in, among other things, the metaverse, so we can likely expect Square Enix to double down on that front when it comes to blockchain, crypto, NFTs, metaverse, Web3. But beyond that, sales of Square Enix games have just been down outside of mainline Final Fantasy entries. I don't have to mention failed live services like Marvel's Avengers and Babylon's Fall, but even games like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, Tomb Raider, Deus Ex couldn't meet Square Enix's sales expectations. So Square Enix is looking for new leadership to mix things up. Now going back to Forspoken, this game was low enough in demand that we got a bunch of steelbooks that were found at a landfill. This hurts to see. No game deserves this, not even Forspoken, says Nico. This is definitely a bit of a waste. It is a nice box, at least, so, it sucks to see them thrown away like this. Now, so far, when it comes to Forspoken's commercial performance, it's all been speculative. It's pretty clear, the writing is on the wall that Forspoken did not do well at all, but we're finally getting confirmation directly from Square Enix via the following translated financial results briefing from February 3rd, 2023, where Square Enix summarizes their performance during this fiscal year. And among the things that they mentioned is Forspoken, and they had some rather bleak things to say about how that game did, starting with reviews of Forspoken, which we released on January 24th, 2023, have been challenging. However, the game has also received positive feedback on its action features, including its parkour and combat capabilities, so it has yielded results that will lead to improvement of our development capabilities of other games in the future. I mean, yes, the combat, the sheer variety of spells, and the magic parkour, that stuff was pretty cool. But, that stuff alone can't carry a game. Everything else around the mechanics, unfortunately, were lackluster, from the story to the writing to the open world activities to the mission and level designs. Everything just was pretty mid, unfortunately. It was just a meh game. Overall, it's the general consensus, and it's kind of my consensus as well from what I've played of it. Now, while Square Enix is trying to paint some positive light on all of this, they ultimately do admit that, with all that said, its sales have been lackluster, the game sales, and while the performance of new titles with February and March release dates will be the ultimate determinant, we see considerable downside risk to our fiscal year 2023 earnings. Looking at the recent releases, I guess they're referring to games like Octopath Traveler 2 and Paranormasight: The Seven Mysteries of Honjo. Their next big release is, of course, Final Fantasy 16, which is slated for a June 22nd, 2023 launch. That, no doubt, will see pretty sizable sales. But prior to that, I don't know. We'll see how Octopath Traveler 2 performs. It would seem as though Octopath Traveler 2 is not currently doing as well as Octopath Traveler 1 did. So Square Enix says that new titles with February and March release dates will be the ultimate determinant in regards to performance. I don't see the February and March releases really making much of a positive dent. Square Enix does admit here that while we have some games in February and March that we still have to consider, we see considerable downside risk to our fiscal year 2023 2023 earnings. At our first half fiscal year 2023 financial results briefing session, I stated that we were designating fiscal year 2023 as a year in which to lay the foundations that will enable us to achieve our medium-term objectives, but that we nonetheless intended to pursue year-over-year growth in sales and profits. In light of current conditions, however, I have to admit that this will not be easy. They had some pretty modest goals for fiscal year 2023, but we're still planning to ultimately grow in sales and profits. But now in current conditions with what's happened recently, they're like, yeah, even our modest expectations will likely not be met. It's going to be a challenge. It won't be easy to meet even this goal right here, which was more about, laying the foundations. So yeah, they're performing even worse than they expected. Eventually, the financial briefing kicked into Q&A mode, and this is where we get some unfortunate news about how Square Enix plans to course correct. Instead of trying to look into how they marketed their games, instead of trying to gauge where they went wrong with their games marketing or with the quality of their titles and how they can improve their development pipelines and whatnot, when asked what kind of initiatives you have in mind to ensure sustainable growth, the answer that was provided reads, major title launches will not be concentrated solely in fiscal year 2024. We have organized our pipeline so we will have a good spread of new releases in fiscal year 2025 and beyond as well. We also hope that you will look forward to the blockchain games we plan to launch in fiscal year 2024 and thereafter. They're betting big on NFTs and that this will draw in big audiences and that this will allow for Square Enix's own economy to form, or players will be able to essentially treat digital assets as investment opportunities for Square Enix to take pieces out of for monetization purposes. If this is the direction that Square Enix is headed in, then they've completely lost the plot. Ubisoft has already tried to implement NFTs into their games and make it a big deal. It completely flopped. Crypto and blockchain have crashed. Same with NFTs. Interest surrounding NFTs has diminished greatly from its peak. They're also chasing a trend that is very stigmatized in the gaming landscape. People just don't want NFTs in their games because they've seen that NFTs ultimately offer nothing of value to players, nothing of benefit. It's just a buzzword that companies want to exploit in order to draw people into spending money on investment opportunities. It's about playing to earn rather than play for fun, which Square Enix literally put in quotes in a New Year letter where they deemed the concept of play to have fun as if it were like a separate category of games instead of it being the whole point of playing games. To me, this reeks of, desperation of executives trying to find an easy way to make money instead of doing the hard work of hunkering down and trying to determine where they went wrong with their games marketing or their games quality and the management of those games and their development. And then one last thing I want to highlight in this Q&A section is the question, how much impact would Forspoken, which you launched in January, have on your Q4 fiscal year 2023 results? And the answer provided by Square Enix was pretty vague. They're not providing exact sales results, exactly how many units they shipped or sold. They're not providing figures as to how much money they spent, what was the budget for the game in relation to how much money it made back. It reads right here, I'll refrain from answering that question in quantitative terms. It reads right here, I'll refrain from answering that question in quantitative terms, partly because the title has just been released, and partly because the answer will hinge on how sales will trend once we have rolled out some forthcoming promotional initiatives. If Forspoken would have been a massive success, we would not see this kind of vague response. They would be touting about how well this game did and how good prospects look for the future. Instead, we're getting this vague response that seems ashamed to share the exact figures surrounding how Forspoken performed, which further highlights that Forspoken is really doing a lot worse than what Square Enix would have liked. And look, every once in a while, every game company, every development studio, every publisher releases a game that just doesn't quite land. But as long as you can pick yourself back up, see where you went wrong, and do better next time, I can be optimistic about the future. But when it comes to Square Enix, their obsession with blockchain games and NFTs and leaning into these greedy monetization elements that really offer no benefit to game design, to making games more fun, to players, as far as we can currently see, that just makes me pessimistic that Square Enix, genuinely wants to learn and improve and just make better stuff down the line. It just gives me the sense that they want to pursue something that will make them easy money, even if it's morally questionable, even if players are telling them near universally that they don't want this stuff. They're willing to go down the path of making monetization machines rather than video games to generate profit, go down the path of manipulations and ways to extract money from people's wallets rather than finding ways to bring joy to people through video games that will incentivize them to spend money on things that are genuinely worth that money, because it's just a great, fulfilling, and just creatively wonderful product. That's just the sense that I get. I don't know what the future holds, but this really just doesn't bode well, in my opinion. It's not something that I look at and go, oh boy, I can't wait to see what we can expect from Square Enix. I fear for the NFT games that we'll see and the IPs that will have blockchain and NFTs shoved in there. And I fear for how all of that stuff will negatively impact game design in the way that other monetization schemes like microtransactions, battle passes, deluxe editions, loot boxes, and all of these different live service monetization machinations have done. Negatively impacted the design of highly anticipated new games from new IPs or familiar IPs that are getting a video game treatment. Seeing Suicide Squad go down the path of live service and seeing just how ultimately generic it looks. I feel like that's sort of the direction we're headed in, except with a new monetization buzzword: blockchain, NFT, metaverse, Web3, crypto, whatever. It's just not a future that I'm personally for, because I've yet to hear a single good reason for why NFTs, blockchain, crypto, Web3, metaverse, etc. will be beneficial to gaming as a whole. It all just ultimately seems detrimental. It all just seems based off of the ultimate goal to make a profit rather than to genuinely push the boundaries of what can be achieved with video games. But that's just one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Square Enix admitting that Forspoken's commercial performance has been lackluster, and them doubling, tripling down on blockchain games and expressing enthusiasm towards those types of experiences. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.